Year is 2020. The situation is grim and continues to get worse. I declare the war games as to have started, and I would request the moderator team to take charge.
We are SARC, and it is this presentation was done by myself, Rachel, Rachi, Nick, and Zamir. So, just to give you a little bit of the overview of what we're going to talk about today. First, we're going to give you some background info about who SARC is. Then that's going to lead into some history about the population growth and migration that has really defined kind of the emissions and energy use for our region in the past decades. Then we're going to move on to how those energy use and those emissions have really increased the climate hazards and vulnerability in our region. And then we're going to finish up with some regional water and energy agreements, along with some international agreements that we hope to bring to the table today. So lastly, our final goals are that we would like regional support from India and China, especially, and the rest of the world in water and energy agreements, such as the ones going on in Pakistan, Nepal, things like that. And also international support for the Bali Action Plan, the Cancun agreements, and the sustainability funding based on the EU project. Thank you.
It's sad to see that Pakistan and many other SARC nations still do not have or subscribe to an equivalent of the Eco-Modernist Manifesto, which has scientists from all over the world, including India. Are the SARC nations looking into some sort of SARC nations other than India looking into some sort of strategy based on that?
I am representing Team USA. So we wanted to start out with this quote. As two great democracies, two innovative economies, two societies dedicated to the empowerment of our people, including millions of Indian Americans, we are natural partners. And that's what we want to stress a lot through this presentation, that we see India as a partner and that we're on the same level. And as two of the greatest democracies in the world, it's our jobs to work together to fix impeding international issues like climate change.
So, with emissions being on a per US dollar of GDP basis, that completely favors service economies, which had the luxury of being manufacturing economies before then. So I was wondering how that is fair to growing economies which don't have the luxury to have a Wall Street.
So I think that looking at emissions on a GDP basis not necessarily favors service economies, but in the Millennium Agreement, the UN suggested that it can be looked at on three cases: total emissions, per capita, and per GDP. And right now, I think a lot of countries are kind of favoring the per capita, especially developing countries and countries with large populations, whereas I think that's not such a good approach because it really encourages counting per capita people that are living without electrification, and it discourages aiding those people, which is kind of why we're taking this approach.
Good morning. I'm here representing the United Nations, and I'm Rose, and along with my team of Thurston, Adrian, Matt, and Joanna. So Asia is the biggest victim to natural disasters. About 30% of last year's economic loss in South Asia was due to natural disasters. And due to the high low-income population in these countries, countries are already struggling to meet the demands of their low-income populations and their growing populations. So when you have these very big low-income populations who devote a lot of their current resources, their very few resources, to providing food for their family and to making sure that their families are safe, they don't have the resources to invest in protections for themselves and ways that they can personally adapt to climate change. So when a natural disaster strikes, they have not prepared in any way. And lastly, our proposed solutions, what do we want? We would like commitment from the G7 about the level of international aid and a framework for this disbursement. We would like an expansion of US-India energy dialogue on renewable energy and clean energy to include all UN members. We would like enhanced regional cooperation so when natural disasters strike, we are ready for this, for response. We want a plan for decarbonization by the G7 by 2050. and we want to plan to fund any protocols agreed to at the Paris conference, where currently there is no plan in place to actually fund anything that's agreed upon. So thank you, and we'll now take questions.
I am my team, part of Team China, so I'm Catherine. We have Nick, Alina, Pedro, and China. To wrap up, we want to go through some policy recommendations. For us, we want to increase non-fossil fuel energy. We want to reduce our carbon intensity. We want to invest in sustainable industries and expand our railroad system. We call upon India and SAARC to strengthen combined efforts for hazard resilience, to collaborate on water sharing issues, to reduce income inequality, and to combat exploitation in the form of outsourcing from developed nations, and to empower women through education, because we believe that when women rise up, the rest of the country does as well. For the USA and for developed countries in general, we call on them to reduce their emissions, to work with developing countries on sustainable methods, and to, again, improve the treatment of outsourced workers. For the UN, we would like to see increased control and oversight of policy and an effectiveness in their peacekeeping programs. With that, we'd like to say thank you and open up to any questions.
We would like to propose a system in which we have 3 weights on the international bi-nation carbon cap that's set, and kind of modeling after Congress in the United States, we'd like to propose 1 weight on a set number of carbon credits per country. So no matter the size of the country, they get this many carbon credits. A 2nd weight on the country's GDP, and a 3rd weight on the population of the country of per capita credit. And then we would like to discuss what you guys feel about this plan and how you might want this to be weighted.
SAARC?
So, as SAARC, we feel that the weighting system that you described, so per country is a needs-based system, per capita is a rights-based system, the right for each person to emit, and per GDP is a status-based system, a status earned by countries progressing from being manufacturing high emissions countries to a level where they could be service countries. So we don't think the fact that they have already achieved service status should factor into the equation, allowing them to emit even more.
Okay, as one of the largest stock democracies, we just want to clarify that as the U.S. we are representing a spectrum of viewpoints, which in this case does include extreme lobbyists who advocate for the inclusion of GDP in the emissions discussion. And so we'd like to move away from that discussion and talk about how you can help us help you. And as a result, we're open to a more per capita basis, as we are again supportive of developing economies. And we'd also like to say that through outsourcing, we're not trying to transfer, quote, transfer emissions, but we're supporting economies through providing employment opportunities. And to continue in this thread, we'd like to facilitate positive discussion about how to help us help you, and we'd like to open up the floor to you to give us proposals for how to help.
So China as a nation is very interested in investing in the infrastructure and development of the developing countries in South Asia. However, to do so, we need capital, and a major issue in that front is that the U.S. is in debt to us about $1.27 trillion. So we want to work on developing a payment plan with the U.S. To get that back to us. And one incentive that we had planned for was to alleviate the U.S. of 5% of that debt on the condition that they would invest it in renewable energy technology. But we want to amend that and now say that we specifically want the U.S. to invest that 5% in solar energy technology, specifically the solar energy technology that is being developed in China, as we are one of the world's leaders on solar energy technology. So
when it says China and India, the infrastructure and economy improvements were supposed to be for all of SAARC, including India?
Yep, that's another discussion for including all of SAARC, but we can include SAARC in this too.
Yes. Yeah,
Because like those specific points that are on number 1 but not on number 3 have been related to SAARC as well.
Which ones exactly?
Education, trade routes.
It was education for all of them.
Yeah. Trade routes was big.
Okay. Are you in support of an agreement or free trade in general on principle?
We will consider. We are open to discussion.
We're open to discussion about the details of what we're trading. It depends on.
We don't think that this particular occasion is the time to talk about free trade in South Asia, so we would like to oppose that issue at this time.
And is everyone in support of US increasing its investment in South Asia?
Yes.
The UN would like to say that in terms of checking practices for the United States multinational corporations, we would be open to offering our support or our
inspection.
To being the inspecting body.
Are we, as a consensus, as this body, are we okay with point B, US?
We've just received message from our stakeholders, especially in the private industry, which funds a lot of the US budget, that we are now perhaps more open to negotiations with the checking of practice of US MNCs, more especially maybe perhaps. We don't explicitly approve it.
So do you explicitly not approve it?
Yeah, we don't approve.
Moving on to the carbon cap, which has been a hotly contested topic. Who would like to go first?
I'm just.
Okay. Sark.
So we just want to specify that SARC will only support a per capita carbon cap, and we support that, as we discussed with the United Nations. I believe there's some mention of that.
India would also agree.
Is there any opposition to a per capita carbon cap?
No.
A purely per capita, yes.
We would like to vote nay for pre-discussed reasons and not discuss them.
We need to the UN would like to clarify the point of negotiations, that is to see that it will not be purely, that we do not support a purely per capita or GDP, and that we recognize that that is not going to be a solution.
The United Nations recognizes the fact that for these negotiations to work, we need the support of countries such as the United States, and we know that there's no way that having a solely per capita cap is going to, like the United States will not involve themselves if that is the case, and so we recognize that another metric, not per GDP, but another metric may need to be involved in this. In the considerations for what the cap will be for each country, but taking that into consideration, if another metric is added that is more favorable to the United States, we think that in turn the United States should have more of a responsibility to help out countries such as SARC and India in reducing their emissions, because we're adding something that is more favorable to them.
And would like to ask that all countries would agree to allowing UN inspectors to ensure that emission levels are as countries had said they would be, to help address the issue of mistrust between countries.
Do you agree to these measures, or should I make it red?
Well, with the conditions, then yeah.
With conditions.
Conditions.
So China, you obviously know the dam discussion is your initiative. We discussed it often in the negotiations. Has anyone changed their minds since the negotiations?
We have a lot to add.
The US.
We would be interested in funding a research project to look at the environmental impacts of those dams before we approve for sure their construction.
China, do you have any thoughts about that?
Our research, as the official Hua Shangyang said, the hydropower stations that we are building will not affect the flow or the ecological systems of the rivers. So countries like India will not be affected by our dams because they're mostly run-of-river dams, so we are not stealing away the water. Only a portion of it is the water that we are keeping and distributing to 100 million citizens with no improved water system in our country.
So, although you talked about when we talked in our negotiations about giving water to Chinese citizens using your dams, like creating reservoirs and stuff, that has a huge environmental impact, as well as taking water away from India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal, all of those that runs the river's course. Also,
U.S. and UN agreed to appeal to G7 to invest in India and South.
Yes. Yeah. So would we put consequences as non-consensus then?
Sorry?
I think the U.S. unfortunately rejected the cap and trade system.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can put like parentheses like maybe no if cap and trade goes through.
You could just put it under a bullet point under cap and trade. No, because
No,
that's all
it's
wrong.
not.
This is
It's just
agreed. It's just like Okay, on that note, our discussions come to a close.